People, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done while you were high or drunk? Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. I got super blazed one night near the beginning of pandemic lockdown and went across the street to the drugstore to get some chips and such. As I approached the automatic glass doors, I saw a person standing on the other side, so I waited for them to come through. I stood there waiting for what felt like an eternity. I was getting frustrated, like, what's up with this clown? Can't they see I'm waiting for them? Then I realized it was just my reflection. Story 2. One night I went out to the backyard to get high, keeping the lights off so my older neighbors couldn't see what I was up to, keeping it stealthy, you know. I had a glass of ice water in one hand as I stepped into the pitch-black yard. Every time I moved, I heard something that sounded like an animal stalking me from the bushes. I'd freeze, and the sound would stop. But as soon as I started moving again, the rustling would start up like something was lurking nearby. If I tried heading back to the door, the sound followed. If I went deeper into the yard, it still followed. I was freaking out, convinced there was a huge animal stalking me. Then I realized it was just the ice in my glass clinking every time I moved. I don't think I've ever felt that dumb in my life. Story 3. I used to live in a fourplex in West Berkeley. The property manager lived upstairs with her 3 mixed-race kids. The oldest looked like a young Bob Marley, and he and his friends would pass by my window every day after school. Eventually, we started nodding at each other, then chatting here and there. Months in, the topic of weed came up, and one of his friends offered to sell me some. He said, "Come up later, before you head to SF on Bard." A couple hours later, I headed up and knocked on the door. The layout of their place was a mirror image of mine. Inside, there were about 12 guys hanging out, playing Sega, eating, chilling. They all looked at me, this random white guy, but they were totally cool about it. One guy rolled a joint, we smoked, I got pretty high. I handed over some cash, got my dime bag, and, feeling good, said my goodbyes. Lots of handshakes, a few later guys, as I headed out. I opened the front door, and it was pitch black outside. I couldn't see a thing. Figured the porch light was out. I stood there for a second, letting my eyes adjust so I wouldn't stumble down the stairs in the dark. That's when I started to make out shapes. Coat hangers. Turns out I'd opened the closet, not the front door. Story 4. This one time, I was coming up morning of day 2 Coachella and had just gotten to the bank of lockers where our group stuff was stored. I was reaching and reaching for the locker, but just couldn't get to it, and the key wouldn't go in. My friend walks up to me, grabs the key out of my hand, and I swear in one step, traverses the distance of a football field, and unlocks the door. Turns out the hit had just hit me like a freight train, and I was on my hands and knees in the grass about 6 feet from the locker, with my arm outstretched trying to insert the key. Depth perception, man, that was a great day. Story 5. So this is when I first started smoking pot. I was sitting watching a movie in my apartment when I noticed a red dot, light, on the wall. It took me a while to figure out where it was coming from as I lived in a top-floor unit. I noticed the laser light projecting from the backyard of a house that was on the other side of the complex fence. It was super dark and windy, and it created shadows, and it looked like someone was posted up in the yard pointing a gun with a laser light in my direction. So I freaked out. I called 911. When the officer was on the way, I realized it smelled like pot, so I quickly lit an incense burner, and he shortly arrived. I had a feeling he thought I was just super stoned, but when I showed him the red light and he saw what I saw, he freaked out too and called for backup. The cop peeked through the window where the light was coming through and drew his gun and told me to get down and army crawl to the kitchen while he called for backup. There was a whole crew of officers at my apartment evacuating the building. The responding officer stayed with me until his team went to investigate. Well, it turned out that this poor little older-than-dirt lady opened the door, confused of course. She directed the officers to the light, and it turned out it was a motion sensor that she had got knocked over, and the wind was blowing the tree and bushes she had. So it looked like people were in her backyard. From that point on, I will never call the cops while high about lights. Story 6. I was in no shape for driving, so I decided to order a pizza, then stared at the wall for about 10 minutes, then thought, wow, I should get a pizza, so I ordered one, and did the same thing again, and again, 3 times total. Pizza number 1 arrived just a few minutes after I had ordered the third one. I was thrilled, tipped the delivery guy generously for his speed, and sat down to eat. Took a slice, zoned out, and then pizza number 2 showed up. I told the delivery girl it must be a mistake, but she showed me the order details with my address. I thought maybe I'd ordered a 2-for-1 deal, and the second pizza was just late, so I gave her a few bucks for her trouble and left pizza number 2 by the door. After a smoke and a drink, I went back to grab more slices, and that's when pizza number 3 arrived. The delivery kid looked familiar. It was my nephew. He said, "Dude, is this a joke?" Apparently, he noticed I'd placed 3 separate orders and told his boss he had to bring this last one himself, just to make sure my uncle's okay. He figured there were only a few reasons why anyone would order pizza like this, and 2 of them involved a lot of recreational consumption. I ended up tipping him with a pizza of his own and a smoke, and he headed home for the night. Story 7. I drank some horrible blueberry vodka because no one else would touch it. I ended up downing about half the bottle. By the end of the night, I was crawling around on the floor, crying because no one would tell me how many teeth I had in my mouth. I was absolutely trashed. Story 8. The first time I smoked keef was on my 21st birthday, after already drinking way too much. The buzz hit so hard I could barely walk, so my friends put me to bed. But for some reason, lying in my room just felt wrong. With my legs basically out of commission, I decided to crawl on my elbows down the hall and down a flight of stairs to an empty bedroom, where I flopped onto the floor in the dark and just lay there for about 30 minutes. Eventually, lying on the ground got uncomfortable, so somehow I managed to get control of my legs again, took the door off its hinges, and laid it flat to use as a makeshift bed. Not the softest, but it got the job done if you like a firm mattress. Story 9. One time, I was sitting in front of my TV watching comedians in cars getting coffee. My bong was on the coffee table between me and the screen. As I watched Jerry Seinfeld driving around New York with a guest, I noticed a cop car pull into their lane behind them. Instinctively, I quietly and slowly moved the bong down onto the floor, just in case the cops saw it through the TV. Story 10. I once ate cat food. When I was living with my parents, they had 2 cats, and they'd store a big 5-gallon bucket of cat food in the garage, keeping it safe from all the local critters, possums, raccoons, mice, you name it. One night, I got home after hanging out with friends and saw the cat food bucket was open. The self-feeder inside was running low, so I figured I'd refill it. As I reached for the food, I started wondering if it had gone stale since the bucket had been left open. So, naturally, I grabbed a handful and gave it a try. I chewed a couple of times before snapping back to reality and realizing what I was doing. I spit it out immediately. Never did figure out if it was stale, just that it was really crunchy. Story 11. When I was 15, I went to a house party and drank way too much of whatever I could find. Outside, there was this huge, fluffy dog in the garden, and I kept going out to pet it barefoot since my heels were killing me. At one point, I felt mud on my foot, so I went all the way upstairs to find a bathroom and wash it off. I was in there scrubbing for a while when I suddenly heard people shouting downstairs. Who stepped in dog poop? That's when it hit me. I'd stepped in dog poop, not mud, and tracked it all over the house. After I finished washing up, I tried to sneak back through the house like a secret agent, humming the James Bond theme to myself, determined that no one would find out it was me. I'm pretty sure, though, everyone within a 5-mile radius figured it out instantly. Story 12. I almost gave myself hypothermia once. During a hike, I found this massive rock and thought it'd be fun to toss it onto a frozen lake to break the ice. For some reason, I decided to walk out onto the ice to throw it. The rock hit, the ice shattered, and I went right in. Soaked and freezing, I had to walk about 2 miles back to the car. Story 13. This one's about my sister. We were both high at the time. We were making dinner. Can't remember exactly what, but it was something like poblano tacos with Monterey Jack. The idea was to hollow out the peppers, stuff them with cheese, and then char them over an open flame to get that nice roasted flavor. While one pepper was cooking, I was busy prepping the next one. After a minute or so, I started hearing my name in this soft, drawn-out voice, the cheese. At first, I didn't realize she was even talking to me. Then I looked up and noticed one of the peppers was on fire. She was just standing there, staring at the stove, still whispering, the cheese, and doing absolutely nothing about it. The pepper actually turned out great, though. Story 14. Once I was eating a burrito like a ravenous beast and straight up bit my own finger. Another time I was gaming, and my hands were cold, as I can get bad circulation. Well, I sat there thinking, man, it would be great if they made socks, but for your hands, and thought I had a great idea. 10 seconds go by, and then, oh yeah, gloves. Had a good laugh at myself for that one. Story 15. When Starlink first launched, my husband and I didn't know about it, and were smoking a fat blend up on the mountain. We looked at the sky and saw it, and started losing our minds because we thought aliens were invading and the lights were their ships. Husband took a video of us losing our marbles because we were feeling impending doom, but then his brother called him a few minutes later to explain what it was, and we felt like dumbass LOL. Story 16. Back in high school, my buddy and myself would drive around and hotbox a few nights a week. We were always prepared with eye drops, gum, hand sanitizer, and body spray so we wouldn't smell like dank when we'd go home afterwards. Anyways, one time we forgot all of the post-chiefing essentials and were stressed that our parents would find out that we were blazed after a session. We ended up finding a bottle of eye drops in his car but still smelled pretty ripe. For some reason, we thought it'd be a good idea to roll in a random person's front yard to get the smell of butt off of us and get more of a natural outdoor scent on ourselves. So we go out and do some log rolls in this person's yard, got back into his car, and he dropped me off at home. I walk into my house, and my parents are on the couch watching some TV or something, and they ask, "Where the hell have you been?" Apparently, the person whose yard we just rolled and just cut their grass. And my gray shirt was covered in grass stains, and I had dirt and grass clippings and shit all on my clothes and in my hair. It didn't get any of the cush smell out of my clothes because they walked up to me and immediately knew I was stoned. I ended up getting grounded for a couple weeks, and my friend and myself had a good laugh at ourselves the next day in class. I randomly think of this moment once in a blue moon, and it cracks me up. Story 17. Christmas about 3 years ago, I was home alone visiting my parents and got very high. The internet was being slow, so I tried crawling through a very small end table instead of moving it to get access to the router to reset it. I got stuck, and in my efforts to free myself, I knocked over a very ornamented Christmas tree. I left it knocked over and blamed it on the cat. Story 18. One time I got a new bong, and I was with a big group of people smoking, and I got so high. So this guy brought like a blue light or something, and he turned it on and said nobody looked directly at the light, but I thought he said look directly at the light, so I stared at it intently for like 5 minutes, and then suddenly everything went black. A few minutes later, the lights turned back on, and it ended up being that they turned the lights out to make something glow, but I 100% thought I had gone blind for a solid 5 minutes. Story 19. I was holding my cat next to the sink, and somehow he just looked like he really wanted to get in the sink and take a bath. So I turned on the water, just a trickle, and edged him closer and closer to the faucet, whispering to him, "Hey buddy, don't you want to take a dip?" In my mind, he totally did, and was just too nervous to admit it. In real life, he's a cat, and cats don't like water. So if you could have looked in on this scene, you would have seen me high as hell, murmuring to the cat, and trying to dunk him in the sink. All the while he is frantically clawing me to shreds, trying to escape, and I am not noticing in my single-minded pursuit of finally letting him experience water. Story 20. Back in college, I was super broke, like couldn't afford basics half the time like shaving cream or toothpaste. One day, I got high and went to an ATM to withdraw some cash. I probably had about $60 in my account and took out $40, but in my hazy state, I thought I'd only requested $20 and somehow got an extra $20 by mistake. So, Jaime thought I'd better be honest, went into the bank, and handed the teller $20, explaining that the AM had given me too much. She looked totally confused since apparently this almost never happens, but took the money anyway. I shuffled out of there feeling like a total idiot. Turns out, ATMs don't randomly hand out extra cash, but now I know. Story 21. My friends don't let me live this down to this day. About 5 of us were chilling in my apartment back in 2008 smoking some dank weed. I had been smoking pretty heavily for a year or so before this, so I had a decent tolerance, or so I thought. Anyway, we smoke out on my balcony and finish up and are all completely shredded. We go inside and decide we should play some Guitar Hero on my Xbox 360. Sounds like a jam to me. There's actually enough of us to use all the instruments and make a 4-man band. So naturally, I booted up the PS3 and got Cloverfield off my Blu-ray shelf and put it in. I sat down in between a couple of buddies on the couch. Nobody has said a word since we came inside. God, we were blazed, and proceed to boot up the deleted scenes. I had watched Cloverfield once and wasn't even that crazy about it. We get about halfway through the second deleted scene, and my buddy sitting next to me with his Guitar Hero mic in hand and lifted up to his mouth goes, "Dude, why the fuck are we watching Cloverfield's deleted scenes?" An hour of straight, stoned laughter ensued. I snapped out of it, but man, I realized how good the stuff we had was that night. Later, we went and got tacos at Jack in the Box. The driver was sober, don't worry, and had a great rest of the night. One of my favorite memories. Story 22. My wife and I had booked a hotel stay for March 2020. The city we were traveling to had just announced a city-wide COVID lockdown the day we arrived. We ended up spending our entire vacation weekend in the hotel, eating edibles, getting drunk, and having sex. We were literally the only guests in the entire hotel. One night, I'd already had several edibles and some alcohol, and we decided we needed to order from a 24-hour cookie place. The guy calls and says he was outside, so I run out of the room, make it was past the front desk, get the cookies, and go back upstairs. When I got back, my wife pointed out to me that I was in nothing but my boxer briefs. I was so focused on hot chocolate chip cookies that I forgot to put on clothes. Story 23. I had a very long conversation by a fire with some guy who was high on something while I was high on something else. We were in that zone where he really needed someone to listen to him in order to hold it together. To this day, I can't tell if he was talking absolute gibberish or I was just hearing gibberish, but I smiled and nodded for a very long time. Story 24. When I first moved into my own apartment, one of my first investments was a sheet of acid, 100 doses. I was going through them at an insane pace. Tolerance builds fast with acid, so after a while, I wasn't seeing the usual trippy visuals anymore, but I was definitely thinking in a very acid-fueled way. For example, I stopped taking the trash out because I thought if the building saw me hauling a bunch of garbage bags, they'd think, this guy has way too much trash, he's disgusting, and they'd either kick me out or call the cops. So instead, I just let the trash pile up around me. I also thought I was destined to be a writer for The Simpsons. Anyway, after about 2 months of heavy acid use, I consumed about 80 tabs. I was feeling pretty fried. One day, I was trying to make pancakes and got frustrated. I had this plate covered in batter and just thought, man, fuck this, and tossed it into the dishwasher, turning it on without a second thought. I heard the machine start making these weird noises. Click, click, gurgle, gurgle. I went over to check and found that I completely broken the dishwasher and black water was pooling at the bottom of it. Cue a new paranoid thought. The building would charge me to replace the dishwasher. I freaked out for a bit, then had this genius idea. I thought, what if I just throw away all my dishes? My brain, still in acid logic, argued with the last rational part of me, but eventually convinced it. Here's the plan. Step 1, throw away all the dishes. Then, when the building asks, did you break the dishwasher? I can get all indignant and say, what? My dishwasher broke? I don't even own dishes. And so, I threw away all my dishes. That was years ago, and I still haven't replaced most of them. Story 25. I kept pulling plates out of the cupboard for my food, and before I knew it, I had 3 plates stacked on the counter because I kept forgetting I'd already grabbed one. When my dad came downstairs, I panicked and grabbed 2 of the plates, rushed into the bathroom because I didn't want to explain why I had 3 plates out for just apple and yogurt. He let the dog outside, so I quickly dashed out of the bathroom and sat down to eat. A few minutes later, he came inside and asked why I took the plates into the bathroom. I panicked again and blurted out that I needed them for safekeeping. To this day, I still have no idea how he never figured out I was high that night. Story 26. One time in high school, my mom went grocery shopping, and of course, I took advantage of her absence to smoke a joint. When she came back, she called me out of the car to help bring in the groceries. I threw in some Visine, slipped on my flip-flops, and went outside. As I was carrying the groceries inside, maybe 2 or 3 bags at a time, I somehow ended up bringing them all the way to my bedroom instead of the kitchen. My mom locked the car, came inside, and asked, where the hell are the groceries? I was standing there with bloodshot eyes, waiting for the Visine to kick in, thinking, oh shit. Story 27. As I approached the entrance of the club, the bouncer put his arms out, signaling for me to stop so he could pat me down. In my slightly confused state, I thought he was asking for a hug, so I went ahead and hugged him instead. Story 28. I wasn't high at the time, but one day I walked into work and saw my boss in the lobby talking on his cell phone. He held up his hand as I walked past, so I thought he was giving me a high five, and I returned it before heading to my desk. A few minutes later, he caught up to me, still laughing hysterically. Turns out, he had actually wanted me to stop so he could talk to me, not high-five him. Story 29. I microwaved cheesecake once because Stone Me thought it was strange that it was always served cold instead of hot like it should be. On a related note, piping hot cheesecake will definitely kill those munchies in no time. Story 30. I was drunk on a mountain that was known to have a decent number of black bears. Since black bears aren't usually aggressive, I figured it'd be a great idea to go outside and find one to pet. A few minutes later, while stumbling around, I came across a black bear rummaging through a garbage can. That's when I realized, in a flash of clarity, that I definitely did not want to pet a black bear. Story 31. Some girls in high school invited me to smoke and swim in a creek with them. So, of course, I went to get high as hell. I ended up sitting in the creek for about 30 minutes, completely still. I was so motionless that a fish came up and bit me on the butt. I didn't even realize what was going on until one of the girls asked, "Why the hell are you just sitting there all alone in the creek, not moving?" Story 32. A few years ago, I went camping with my wife and some friends. We were all sitting around the fire, drinking, when her brother and I decided to take a walk and smoke some joints. After we finished, I needed to piss, so he headed back to the group while I took care of business. By the time I made it back, I was pretty baked. I stood there for a few minutes, watching the fire and sipping my beer. Then I noticed a Coleman lantern on the picnic table and thought, I don't remember us having one of those. That's when it hit me. I was standing at the wrong campsite, surrounded by strangers, while my group was sitting at the site next door, laughing and wondering what the hell I was doing. Story 33. After we smoked, I went to White Castle to grab food for everyone. We all had the same order, 2 double cheese sliders and an order of mozzarella sticks. When I gave my order, instead of just saying I wanted 8 double cheese sliders in total, I repeated 2 double cheese sliders and mozzarella sticks for times. By the time I finished, the cashier sounded completely defeated. I still cringe when I think about it, but it's also one of my funniest smoke stories. Story 34. A few years ago, I was on shrooms with some friends, and we went on a walk to smoke a cig. Every time I took a puff of my cigarette, I was expecting to taste Mountain Dew, and I was disappointed every time that it didn't. I quit smoking cigarette a few days after that. Story 35. I bought fresh fish at the wholesale fish market after partying all night until dawn. When you're up that late and see sober people going about their day, the fish market is strangely fascinating. But then, the next afternoon when you wake up thirsty, open the fridge, and see a bunch of silvery eels staring back at you, that fascination suddenly vanishes. You just can't relate to it anymore. Story 36. It's not that weird, but I get really weird sensations when I'm high. Other people probably get it too, but I just don't know how to describe it. But one time I was just rubbing my leg a little because I was cold and my friend was sitting next to me. So then I was like, well, I can feel my hand and I can feel my leg. I wonder if I can feel hers? So I rubbed her leg and was like, wow, I can't feel it, and I didn't really understand why. My friend just laughed at how stupid I was. LMAO. Story 37. I had to run into the gas station to grab another Dutch, and for some reason, I noticed my best friend's boyfriend had a full chicken costume in the back seat. I thought it'd be hilarious to wear just a mask into the store. I didn't realize how badly I messed up until the girl at the register started screaming for the guy in the back room. They had just been robbed 2 weeks prior. Story 38. The dumbest thing I've done while I was high was thinking my bowl of cereal was my phone and just tossed the whole bowl, milk, cereal, spoon, onto my bed. That was an effing mess. Story 39. Got high. Ate a bunch of jalapeno poppers, not that weird. No, the weird part was the calendar appointment I made for myself the next morning that just said, ha 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 ha. Jaime apparently predicted the right time for my morning bowel movement. And as those little jalapeno poppers burned again on the way out, he reached out across time and space to laugh at sober me about it. Story 40. I spent 45 minutes searching for my glasses with my friend, then finally gave up because I was running late. As I went to put on my sunglasses, I accidentally smashed them onto my glasses. Turns out, I had been wearing my glasses the whole time, and neither I nor my friend noticed. Story 41. I panicked, thinking I had lost my iPod on the way to the train station. I got off the train and retraced my steps all the way back to my apartment. only to realize I'd been listening to music the entire time, on my iPod. Story 42. I ate mushrooms by myself, and then some guy showed up at my house with a pizza, so I signed for it. The problem was I hadn't actually ordered any pizza. When my boyfriend came home, he asked, "You ordered pizza?" It had been sitting on the table for hours, and I thought I had just dreamed it. Turns out the guy had come to the wrong house entirely. At least I tipped him generously, so I like to think I did the right thing. Story 43. I stood by the sink, tears streaming down my face as I devoured the juiciest, most delicious whole, ripe mango. In my mind, it felt like some sort of alien creature offering its life for my enjoyment. I genuinely believed it was the most beautiful, selfless act anything had ever done for me, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I must have looked like a total weirdo, but honestly, it was still a beautiful moment. Story 44. I used to go to a friend's place every week to watch a specific TV show and get stoned. Around the fourth week, my friend suddenly started freaking out like he'd just had a huge epiphany. They have the same names as us? It took us 4 episodes to realize the 2 main characters had the same names as us. That was seriously weird. Story 45. One night, I came home crossfade, easily the most intoxicated I'd ever been. I walked into the living room and pushed the TV to the back of the table. Instead of sitting on the couch, I plopped down where the TV used to be, staring silently at the couch in complete darkness for at least 30 seconds before finally muttering, "So this is what it's like to be a TV." That's when I realized I'd had way too much, so I went to bed before I did something even dumber. Story 46. I decided to barbecue a tri-tip I'd been marinating for a couple of days and set up my camper grill in the bed of my truck while it was raining outside. Halfway through, I thought, maybe this isn't the best idea. So I decided to finish cooking indoors, but like an idiot, I removed the mini propane tank before the flame had fully gone out. That was a huge mistake. I could have easily burned my face off, but luckily I reacted fast and jumped out of the pickup bed like a stunt double in an action movie. I ended up belly flopping onto the wet grass. And of course, I landed straight into dog shit. Story 47. My roommate and I ate a bunch of can of butter, and after 3 hours with no effects, we decided to walk to the discount grocery store. Of course, that's when it hit us like a truck. While we were there, we came across this huge bag of cheese puffs. Seriously, it was the biggest bag I've ever seen. On the way home, we tore it open and started munching. As we passed a 24-hour fitness with huge windows, we couldn't understand why anyone would choose working out over eating cheese puffs. We pressed our faces against the windows, snacking and mocking the people inside, until a worker came out and told us to leave. Story 48. Tickled my mate for 20 minutes straight, and when I stopped it felt like I was missing something in life. Story 49. I woke up in clean pants, lying on the bathroom floor, smelling like I'd just showered. My wife wouldn't tell me what happened for days. Here's the story. I'd been day drinking with co-workers, which turned into evening drinking. When I got home, I wasn't feeling too hot, so I went to the bathroom. I sat down on the toilet because, well, both ends were not cooperating at once, and I started throwing up in the sink. At some point, I must have fallen off the toilet and passed out on the floor. My wife came in to check on me, clean me up, change my underwear, and tuck me in. That's all she would tell me, though. She still laughs every time she sees Ferrero Rocher, for some reason. That was my most recent incident, but when I was younger, there were plenty more equally ridiculous moments. Story 50. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for a Halloween party weekend. It was a 2-hour drive, and of course, I started drinking on the way. We got there around 5 p.m., and by then I was already chugging Goldschlager and vodka. The last thing I remember was it being 7 p.m., and I figured it was time to hit up the house parties. After that, everything's a blur until I woke up at 10 a.m. the next day. Apparently, I managed to puke in 3 random people's houses and not in the bathroom. I didn't know any of them. I also called and texted my exes who were in town, then got pissed when none of them would meet up with me. To top it off, I somehow got my best friend jumped by a group of guys. I broke someone's toilet and someone else's door. The whole night was a mess, and I was so embarrassed about it. Story 51. For my 30th birthday, I got blackout drunk on Jack and Cokes. At some point, I stripped down and flashed my longtime married friend while she was trying to help me get to bed. Then I puked in a tiny trash can and passed out. The next thing I remember is waking up naked on the couch, wrapped in a unicorn princess blanket. My friend said it was funny and harmless, but the fact that I don't remember 5 to 7 hours of the night freaks me out. I decided to stop drinking liquor after that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.